Bienvenidos a todos. I'm Lucy, and I'm actually absolutely thrilled to welcome you to our exciting webinar on personal branding. A huge shout out to Dairy Farmers of America for sponsoring this month's Latina Track webinar. We truly appreciate your support, and a special thanks to Cherise Belt for her instrumental role in the partnership. We are excited to dive into today's session organized by Prospanica's Latina Track Committee. Together, we'll explore the incredible significance of personal branding, whether you're looking to elevate your career, expand your influence, or simply gain clarity on your unique identity. You're in the right place. So get ready to unlock your potential and embrace your unique story. Without further ado, I am honored to present Cherise Belt, who will share a couple of words on behalf of the Dairy Farmers of America and their sponsorship with the Latina Track. Cherise?
Thank you so much, Lucy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to spend this time with you today. At Dairy Farmers of America, we are in full support of all the amazing things that Prospanica is doing for the community. We've been around for a long time, and Dairy Farmers of America is one of the leaders in the raw milk industry, and we believe in driving inclusion and supporting the communities that we serve. And so I'm excited to be able to speak with you all today. We're focusing on a lot of our internal programs that we provide for our employees. We have our DEI council, we have employee resource groups, we have external partnerships. And as you can see, our goal is to drive the nourishment of the things that we create with our farm families for the communities that we serve. So I hope that you all enjoy this amazing session, and I'm excited to be a partner today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cherise. I'd like to express my gratitude to you and the Dairy Farmers of America for the support of the Latina Track. We firmly believe that these webinars play a vital role in uplifting our Latinas in the workplace. So with that said, I'd love to introduce you to our expert speakers. We've got a great lineup today. Jacqueline Ruiz, Larry Sarabello, Selena Rivera, Panagiotta Baradelis, and I think that's who we've got. So if in that order, if you could please take a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself in 2 to 3 sentences.
Thank you. Thank you so much for making us part of this amazing webinar. And of course, we're super excited to share the inspiration today on personal branding. My name is Jacqueline Ruiz, and I'm the CEO of Fig Factor Media, JJR Marketing. I've ran a marketing PR agency for the last 18 years and a publishing company for the last 10. I'm also the author of 36 books and one of the few Latina sports airplane pilots in the United States.
Very nice. Thank you. Larry's here.
Hi, everyone. How are you? I am Floricel Bello. I am the founder and CEO of Floricel Bello Incorporated, an events and marketing strategist firm, and also Bellas Fashionistas Foundation. It is a pleasure to be here. I am also one of the Latina Track committee members, and it is a pleasure to be here today amongst these Latina leaders. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And Selena?
Hello, everyone. My name is Selena Rivera. I am the owner of Mian Media, and I have a product called the Digital You that I'll talk to you a little bit more about today. But I founded the Digital You so that I could help individuals like all of you create their professional and personal brands online safely and efficiently. And I'm glad to be here today with all of you.
And one more. Oh, oh, there you are. Okay.
Hola a todos, ¿cómo están? I'm Panagiotta Bavadelis, and I am the head of marketing for Berkeley College with many decades in the industry across higher education, media, entertainment, and marketing and business.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for your introductions, and we're really excited to learn more about your stories and experiences. I can already tell we've got a great group here and that this conversation is going to be really exciting. So what we'll do is we'll go through some questions to start, and then at some point, folks that are listening, feel free to drop comments in the chats, and we can answer those questions a little bit later on. So there'll be a lot of opportunities for you all to participate as well. So what I'll do is I'll throw out the questions and we'll kind of take it from there. So the first one that I wanted to ask is how can you ensure that your personal brand aligns with your professional goals? So I don't know, maybe Selena, if you want to kick that one off.
For sure, I'd love to. So in my world, what I like to teach people is that the personal and professional brands, first off, there's an intersection of the two, and you have two tracks of your lives, but you decide what goes out about you, right? You decide what you release out of that gate about your personal and professional brands. But aligning the two together really starts with knowing, what do I want my unique brand and personal brand to be, first off, documenting what that is, and then looking at your professional brand. Your professional brand is your career, right? It is how you've established yourself in an industry. So it's your persona, the personal, and how you want to be thought of or perceived in the industry. And how do you find the perfect merge of those two? So I like people to start to really write that down and do a little bit of homework, and really think about thoughtfully, so that they can be strategic about how they bring the two together.
It's terrific. Terrific.
If
Jacqueline,
I
did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would love to. You know what? I agree with you, Selena, and I think that the world has gotten smaller over the last few years, especially with all the technology. So although I agree that there might be two tracks, I think that the internet has made it so it's really a unified, voice, right? Because people are now accessing your personal life as well through the internet and through social media. And it's so what I typically recommend our clients is saying, you know what, there's something unique about the message, the legacy that you want to create. And I think there's a blurry line between professional, personal, and anywhere in between. And if if we're able to capture the purpose, which is, in my word, my world, when I do this exercise with our clients, is typically a purpose, a verb, and an adjective, and then from there, like for example, my purpose is elevate women, right? From there, you create the mission, the vision, and all of the stuff. And then that is the common denominator that kind of unites all of you, right? And I really, lately I haven't really seen a lot of distinction between the two, just because it's like who you are and the essence of who you are and that legacy it's kind of it's like one. And if you're vivacious, if you like family, if your core values are certain, I feel like it just translates into everything you do, and you become that common denominator that brings it together. So but I kind of like how you approached it. I just haven't seen it that way, which is why we're here having this conversation. I love it. I'm already learning
No.
something new.
Exactly. What I wanted to add on to that was that why I say that is because who we are in our personal side, like say, for example, I may have values on my personal side, but on my professional world, I have a persona, or I have a company that I am associated with. And so I have to think about how those two will merge together. So when you think about that, and when you present yourself, if you present two very different selves, right, in different platforms, people will catch up to you, right? They're going to say, you're one way here and one way there, and now you're not a believable persona. So I like people to look at who they are individually and as a person, and what they want that to look like, their contributions to their communities versus their contributions to their companies, and find a nice harmony between those two, and make sure that there's some cohesion between the two. That's why I like them to think about both of them. But exactly what you said, there is blurry lines, and with AI, it's even become more blurry because we're using tools like that. So I agree with you.
Yeah,
But I was gonna yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I agree with the two of you guys. And I think that for the most part, and you guys have hit it in so many different angles, but I think that when I present these personal branding workshops to the students, I say to the students, you have to know who you are. And that comes with your core values, your principles as a person, because you cannot deviate when you're doing professional and when you're doing your personal. That kind of reflects on social media. For example, I don't take pictures with liquor, with anything in the hands, because it really denotes who you are. And, you know, and for the youth per se, they're always looking on social media. I say to them, you have to know who you are as your identity. That is who you are. And that encompasses your values, your principles, who you are as a person, what you were taught, no, to respect or disrespect people. No, who are you? And then that, at the end of the day, it comes into your purpose, your talent, and your gifts. So merging all those together, to me, that's why I created Bellas Fashionistas, right? I'm trying to replicate what I was given as a youth, these opportunities through my parents' network that I thought they did not have because we had arrived from the Dominican Republic. And unbeknownst to me, I'm already working at Channel 13 by the age of 15 because of my parents' network. However, I was very clear with what I wanted to do at the age of 12. I knew what I wanted to pursue in my career. So having those core important values and principles of who I am, no, because we all born with them, we don't know until we identify and continue with our professional development. But that personal development component is vital into our personal brand, that just mimicking those kind of values with, let's say, for example, Mac. They're respectable, no, where they have so many attributes that make up who Mac is, that when everyone speaks about Mac as a product, they know that they're reliable. So who are we as individuals, and how are we transferring those skill sets of who we are into our professional setting, which goes along the lines with what you guys have mentioned.
I call it the VIX. When I talk to people, I'm like, let's talk about your VIX first, because it's the VICS. It's the values. What values do you have? Your interests, your contributions, and your skills, right? Let's look at what those four are personally and what you want those to be. And then let's bring what you want over into the professional area, because you are representing a company as well. So you have to think about their values and their brand as well.
Yeah,
I love that. I love catchy little mnemonic there.
yeah, it also depends on what your story is. You know, when I do these workshops and I sit with the students, I always ask them, I have this creative list, right? So you start at the top with, what is your story? And sometimes we don't know. So we have to do a little digging and really see who we are. And what, you know, Fletty said was speaking about those identity points and what our identities are. And we tend to, due to societal stigmas, we stick ourselves in a box. And we tend to say we can only do this one thing. But really, I always say, squash the box. There is no box. Who are you? Who do you want to be? Who do you want to emulate? So do a little research once you find that story component, and find someone that inspires you, and kind of take a little bit of those pinpoints and add it to your journey. So I think we also have to allow ourselves a little bit of grace, because our story does change over time. Our goals change over time. So we do want to allow ourselves that flexibility to pivot.
To grow, absolutely. We're seasons. We're
Yes,
people.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think our cores don't change, our core values. I think they're part of our essence. They're part of, the legacy, and we're the common denominator of all the magic that happens around us. So when I do this branding exercise, I think of, if you have a table, if you have all the sparkles spread across the table, because in your role as a professional, you are certain thing, you've accomplished certain things. In your role as a philanthropist, you've done this certain thing. In your family, you've done these certain things. So for my clients, what I try to do is bring all of that into the fold, because it's not like you're two different people or five different people. All of that is the essence of who you are. And I think bringing that together and documenting it, encapsulating it, and packaging it in a way that is authentic to you, right? I mean, the deliverables might be different in every role that you have, but the essence of your core is still exactly the same. And believe it or not, I mean, I lead, I've done a lot of personal brandings for a lot of really high-level executives and all people of all walks of life. And many of them have never done that exercise of documenting who they are, their accomplishments, in correlation to all of their magic. And sometimes many of them focus just on their professional side, and they forget to focus on their personal side. And really all of that is them, right? And I think the blurry lines now that we have on social media and beyond, where there's less space for lack of transparency. It's all the more authentic that you are, the more, and who cares if you bring, who you are, like, hey, I like to, donate money or whatever the case might be. That you can bring to any of the other settings. And I think the more alignment that you find, the more authentic that voice, becomes, and the more people kind of connect with you. And it's just fascinating to see how many people that have been in business for so many years, they've never done the exercise of documenting, encapsulating, and packaging, what their legacy really truly is. And that's
Wow.
aha
Making it
moments,
themselves as a brand. Yeah,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
was going to say that that really ties into sort of that next question, which is how do you find that balance between your professional and your personal brand? And, and maybe also if somebody just wants to talk a little bit about what is that brand, right? Like, I think for some folks, that maybe have been in the industry a little bit longer, you might understand that it's your LinkedIn profiles, the groups you're part of at work, and but then you've got Facebook and Instagram, and how do you do that? So maybe just talk a little bit about how do you find that balance between the two, and some recommendations. I think Jacqueline started to touch on that, but I don't know who else would like to maybe take that next.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Selena. I find that question so interesting, Lucy, because I've been doing events for over a decade now, and marketing strategy, representing clients and brands. And when I launched Bella Fashionistas in 2012, I was in between both of them. But someone said to me in 2016, in like 2021, I didn't know you did events. I said, well, yeah, that's the other side of me. And then they see me sitting on a panel during the pandemic for the Special Events Expo, which is one of the biggest I would say conferences here at the Javits, and they had to move it. And someone said to me, what are you doing sitting on that panel? I'm like, before you met me as Clarissa Bello, the founder of Bellas Fashionistas, but I've been doing events for over a decade. He says, I didn't know that. And and it's hard to kind of keep that balance. And I know that Jackie Lynn could also discuss on that, because she does so much on the side, but it still represents who she is. And for me, when people see me on TV and they see me on the flip side of the event, it's a little bit hard. Let me tell you, it's not easy. However, how do I keep the balance? Is we have a purpose, we have talents and gifts, and those gifts purpose multiply throughout the course of time that lead us to that other outside of what God has designed for our lives. So yes, I started as a marketing strategist doing events since I was 17 years old, working in the film and media industries. And I service clients in that industry and more. But when I'm on the Bellas Fashionistas Foundation side, speaking about what we're doing and how we're impacting, it's a very fine line to switch. And for me, is someone says to me, stick to your lane, and I'm like, why? just because you focus in one lane, that doesn't mean that you and I are meant for purpose on the same
Right.
avenue.
Exactly.
So for me, it was a little bit I wouldn't say offensive, because I really don't care what people have to say, but I'm staying true to myself, and I'm continuing to do what God has designed and purpose for me. That's it. As long as I'm fulfilling those needs and it's working and you're moving, like Pilotina, and she's doing all these books, publishing all these books, we need to accomplish what we're here for. I'm so hyper focused on purpose. Everything else is secondary, but it all comes in alignment. So it's just being gracefully with yourself, having that honest and being honest with yourself, and knowing that there's a mission that we're here for that has to be accomplished.
You know what? And I
Add
may
to
I
that.
add on that. Go ahead.
I was just going to add to that something that Panayota said that I agree with, and that is that the journey that we're on. So I agree that we are all dynamic people. We have at where we are in our lives now, we all have had different roles and different interests and things that we play. But I do think that, from the strategy side of it, in whatever season you are, or whatever part of your journey you're in, I think it's really good to think about how much time or effort you're going to give. First, giving people the number of impressions that they need to say, okay, I know that Panayota does this, right? And then after I've gotten enough of that, then I can sprinkle in whatever that next thing is that I want them to know. Oh, Panayota does this, but she also does this, because people can get very confused very quickly, and they can't be your champion anymore because they don't know exactly what it is that you do. So that's why I like to think about social media very strategically. And
Right.
I think about Throwback Thursdays. I love that day, and I leverage that day often with my customers and clients, because I say that's the day that you want to bring back something that you did an event to remind and sprinkle in while you're on another journey, sprinkle in and remind them that you did this other things too, right? So it's almost like you start to create your own score of music, and that you're the conductor of, right? And you've got all your instruments playing, your instruments being the different social platforms, what you're putting on Instagram versus what you're putting on LinkedIn. It should all come into harmony. There shouldn't be a shock factor of
You know what? I think that that's exactly and precisely why personal branding is so important, because personal branding is the explanation of all the magic that you create. I was recently at an event in Denver, and somebody came up to me and she's like, "Oh, I do keychains, I do this, I do that," and I said, "She's like, I do everything," and I said, "No, you don't. You create beautiful experiences. You provoke micro moments." And you do that through the keychains and the cakes that you bake and all.
I love that. That's great.
Holy moly, she started crying in front of me. So when people say to me, okay, I can literally, when people say, oh, you do all this stuff, I go back to my purpose. And this is why personal branding is so important, because then there's no confusion. If you decide what that purpose is, which is a verb and an adjective, elevate women is mine. From there, I create a mission, a vision. I identify those core values that I've been, been living my entire life. Then I create a positioning statement, which is who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and why. And then from there, I furthermore create a manifesto. And then those core values become key performance indicators, which become deliverable. So if my purpose is elevate women as a pilotina, which is Latina pilot, I made up that word because that's also part of my branding, right? We can make up our own identity and our own words that bring all the things we do together. I elevate women through marketing, public relations, publishing over the last 10 years, my 36 books and over 500 that I published for people around the world, and even flying airplanes. So all of that, I don't care how crazy they are, they all come back together to two words: elevate women. And I think that is, an amazing key takeaway that people watching this webinar can take with them, that no matter what you do, if you can find that common denominator, that purpose, that fire, that music in your heart, like Celine was saying, that basically becomes the glue that brings it together. And then it makes sense. Then you can make keychains and you can do this. I even have a brand of coffee. I make board games. I mean, I've done everything under the sun. But if I go back and say, what is that? I elevate women. That's my purpose in life. And I'll do that
That's
till
beautiful. Yeah.
Agreed.
Panayota, did you have any input on sort of that balance between the brands?
Yeah, again, going back to, we wear a million hats, right? Not just as women, as Latinas, we tend to put one on, take one off, and kind of shift as we go and be a chameleon, right? We do the code switching, we do all of the things depending on what room we're in, what we're representing. So it's definitely important professionally to see what the brand is that you're affiliated with. So many of us here are founders and CEOs and all of that great goodness, right? But most of us in industry are not. So when you work for an institution, for example, today I'm representing Berkeley College, which is one institution under my belt. So you have to think of, well, what does that institution represent? What does that brand align with? And how do I complement that brand? And it's knowing how to take those pieces of the mission, the core values of that, and do my own align with that brand. Is this a good fit for me? Am I passionate about what this company stands for? And is this strategic for my career path and what my goals are? And once you figure that out and put that into alignment, then you can go ahead and add that to your brand kit. So I always say you have a tool belt, right? and that's filled with multiple kits. So you have to find out what the correlation and strategy is between all of those. I see Selena shaking her head like she has, the wheels are turning.
Yes, no, because recently I've been getting into the universities and UVU, and I did my first HBCU and at Virginia Norfolk University, and the kids in there were amazing. And one of the things that I was telling them, and if all of you can use this, or if all of you practice this, I would love to hear how you practice this. But I was telling them that the platform I want you to think of the social media platforms as your personal websites. I don't want you to think about them as this is LinkedIn and I can do this, I can't do this. It's what can you imagine? How do you bring your brand to life in these platforms? And so someone would say, well, I want to be a lawyer, but I can't put that in my headline because I'm not a lawyer yet. And I said, well, what's wrong with putting aspiring lawyer there? And putting that there so that people know what you aspire to, but also in the searches, you may come up still, if someone's looking for a lawyer in your region or maybe intern or something like that, then you've got the right combination. So wherever you are in your journey, think about that and put aspiring is okay, right? For the younger people, but where you are in your journey, that dictates how you're changing it. I always say, they say, I know what you're going to say. It's not a set it and forget it. Your digital brand is not a set it and forget it. It's a constant evolution. You've got to constantly be feeding it and constantly thinking, where am I at? Where have I changed? And how have I changed? And applying that so people can see you evolve through
Correct.
that.
And those goals, are subjective. We're asked on multiple panels, right? I'm sure everyone here has been asked, what does success mean to you? And it's subjective. So you truly have to identify what your goals are. And I'm big on the vision boards, ladies. Jot it down, document it, split it into 4 and figure out, your 4 buckets and where you want to go. But more often than not, we tend to be our largest obstacle. And we put in self-doubt, there's imposter syndrome, there's all of these things. And it's difficult for us to get out of our own head and market ourselves. So I always say, find a battle buddy and, find someone that you can have with you and can take a look at your portfolio or take a look at your CV and give you that, that fresh pair of eyes where you haven't been staring at it. As marketers, we can market anything and anyone, but when we look at ourselves, that's where the difficulty comes in. So, your network is your net worth. So really align yourself with like-minded folks and really broaden yourself and connect with everyone. And, it's always good to invite someone for a cup of coffee and strategize.
What do you think are some of the biggest challenges and obstacles that women in particular face in personal branding? I know, Sarah, you mentioned how you're very thoughtful of how you appear in photos and in different posts. And what are some of the challenges that maybe might be also unique for women and really as you're evolving your brand and how maybe we can overcome them? I know, Panayota, you just mentioned like a battle buddy, but what are some other ideas that we might try?
Well, in my space, I work with a lot of women, and one thing that keeps coming up over and over again, as I ask questions that unveil their legacy and unveil their purpose and unveil with these aha moments where we're crying, we're discovering and uncovering the magic that has always been inside of them, right? And for the first time, they're kind of getting that deep in touch with them. Imposter syndrome, such a big, it's like, man, you see women that are so accomplished. I suffer from this too. I'm about to go on a stage with 3,500 people and my legs are shaking and thinking, I work with my business coach for 2 months, and she's like, put a picture of you when you were a little girl on your phone. So you look at it and, just remind yourself to love on that little girl, right? Before you get on stage, so you can believe it and you could be, and I see this coming up over and over again. And it's like, when you go back to that purpose and you say, what's my legacy? And if it's true that I live to serve and serve to live, then everything that, all my gifts, everything that I give out is going to serve other people, then it makes it okay for you to say, I can be that vessel. I can be that individual to uplift other people or, find a purpose that is bigger than you so that you can be okay in your own skin, sharing that beautiful message. And, I always say, sometimes you find a mission and sometimes a mission finds you. So do you surrender, and you surrender to that mission? And, I think that makes it more okay. And of course, having a picture of you as a little girl or a little boy on your phone too.
I mean, and we're all here today, right? I mean, I think this is very clearly something that we're all passionate about, right? Finding ways to help other Latinas. And I mean, it's something that, I don't imagine all of us sort of woke up and we're like, oh, we're going to do this, but somehow you're all drawn to this as, as we've talked about our values and our missions and what are our goals that we want to do as part of our brand. I know we talked a little bit about imposter syndrome, and that's obviously a big obstacle that I think many women face. How do you sort of use your brand maybe to help to work through some of that's a big obstacle?
I think that one of the ways that I've helped, and you probably all have done the use the same strategy, is that I get them to not think about their brand as something they have to do over, like, in one day. The best way, they say, to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So I tell them, let's go down to your career that you're at now. Tell me one thing that you've done, that you've contributed to, or that you've done well there, or that you're proud of. And we write that out, and I stop the session. And like, okay, we're done for today. That's it. And they're like, that's it? I'm like, no. And it wasn't that hard, right? It wasn't that hard to bring one thing to the table. And guess what? You're not going to get a bunch of people to say, why did you put that out there? Or who are you to put that out there? Or because we all think that the world is on our shoulder right before we hit publish. Right. And people are sweating. I've seen many executives on MailChimp. I love the little monkey that when you go to hit the send button on a MailChimp, he starts sweating the more longer you take to hit the button to send your email blast out. And I see that in people. They get really just kind of sweaty, and they're nervous just to hit the publish button. And it's like, just everything takes time to develop habits. Habits come with doing things regularly, small things at a time. So publish one thing, and then set it for every Monday, every Sunday, whatever day it is, come back to the next Sunday. And now you just publish one thing. Before you know it, after 2 months, you've got 8 different things if you've written out there, and it didn't take you a bunch of time. You didn't have to slave over thinking, oh my God, what am I going to put here? What am I going to put there? And in having to have it perfect. You don't have to have anything perfect, because it is your personal website. It is your personal brand online. So develop it slowly, develop it methodically, strategically, and do it just a little bit at a time.
Yeah, I love that. And I know, Sarah, you've mentioned as an entrepreneur, you started your journey in one place and you've kind of built up all of these other amazing things that you've done with the foundation and a lot of how you give back. What were some of the challenges that you faced as you were building that helped you with your brand?
I think surrendering. Jackie and I have long conversations about divine download. And I think that for me was finding that purpose. Finding that purpose had helped me align with my gifts and talents. And those gifts and talents had multiplied. And, I think that once I looked at it in so many different ways. So I want to touch on 3 avenues, right? So one of them is what you guys have mentioned. Imagine teaching that to students, finding their gifts and talents, and then their purpose is something that is continuous, right? So the talent and the gifts that multiply. But what you do, Jackie, with your professionals and your executives, I actually do that with the youth, which is powerful. It's powerful because then they're more honed down and they're more confident, because building the self-confidence for the youth is a key perspective and a key role for us. So when we help them with those personal development and help them identify their career path, then we connect them to the opportunities such as Prospanica, who are one of the nonprofit organizations in the nationwide that they continue with the professional development. So I find that to be such a powerful tool, identifying that for the youth. The other thing that I'm going to focus on is on the professionals. I recently went to do a speaking engagement, and I had no idea what I was going to talk about. And I said, Freddy, this is so easy for you. Yes, nervous and not knowing how to approach a group of executives and entrepreneurs and lawyers and judges. Imagine, you guys know. So I think that one of the things that it was a divine download, and I use this, Jackie, and I give you props for it because she was the one that had created that phrase. And I mentioned your name, Jackie, by the way. You're like probably well known in the tri-state area. But anyway, I think that when people it's impressive because I worked in corporate America, right? I was 15 years old. And when I worked in corporate America, I found that I was probably the only Latina. There were two Latinas. I was the only dark-skinned Latina. And then there was a Cuban Latina, a beautiful woman. And I was everyone's little sister, I remember. And I have God's grace over me. But what I want to say is that a lot of the professionals, when we are in these spaces, we don't identify ourselves because we are probably the only minority versus the majority. And that's when we come into the imposter syndrome, right? So I said to them, a lot of you guys are probably well accomplished. You're probably working in a field that you may not like or do like, or have not, or have come to a wall saying, what am I going to do now? That is how we reinvent ourselves in a way, and just call it, I think I call that finding that spark. Because once we find that spark, which is purpose, we are able to automatically surrender into not caring about how much money we've made, how much help we have had or done in the past, but there comes a moment when there's emptiness, and that's lack of purpose. That's lack of purpose and lack of what God had designed us to do. How do I find that space? To answer your question, Lucy, I found it through prayer. Prayer helped me be where I am today. Prayer helped me, guide me, gave me the strategies, the vision to be where I am today. And without prayer, I am nothing. Without God, I am nothing. And I will continue to say that because I've never knew that I would accomplish this much in this time. And maybe if I would have listened and surrendered to the purpose back many years ago, I would have probably been at a different state right now. But this is where I am supposed to be, because I would not be able to talk about how my trajectory and my process have helped me be where I am today, with beautiful ladies here today, powerful ladies and leaders, and being able to sit on a committee with you, Lucy. And and
I know,
these
right?
are all the things that and these are all the things that help us purpose, reinventing ourselves. And I mean it in finding that spark, that purpose that helps us guide us, and that prayer that guides us to open our eyes and take the blindfold that we are constantly putting away, that brightness and what God has had destined us to be. And yes, to your point, Panagio, please help me pronounce your name because I don't want to
Panayota,
butcher
it's
it.
fine. We're in a
Okay.
safe space.
You had mentioned being with the right people. My father said, and if you guys are all Latinas, you would understand, dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. I was in my early 40s and I said, or late 30s, and I said to myself, I said, this is true to this day in business and anywhere you go. And it's a whole 360. It's not only when we were young, it's now. Because there's people that don't do business the right way. There's people that do things the wrong way. And, and then there's like these groups, right, that hopefully God dismantles, but that are not up to no good. But, we pray for them. But yes, that is such an influence to this day in our professional setting.
Well, I think that really ties in. We got a question from Angela, and one of the questions she just asked is, how important is it to build a community, and what are the best ways to leverage networks as Latinas in personal branding? And I think that kind of ties into a little bit about what we were talking about this community here, the group of us on this call. But how are some ways that you can build that community and really leverage each other as you build your brand?
Yeah, it's vital. I see Selena had a thought too, so I'll be quick and jump to her. But no, it's vital to build that community. And first and foremost, you have to take a look at your perspective. Sometimes we look at a situation as very daunting. and we don't know how to approach that situation. But, out of discomfort comes growth. So once we're in that situation, our point of view changes. And that allows us to become open-minded, which brings us to opportunity. So because of opportunity, we are all on this panel today, and we are growing our community, right? Just by being on this panel. And I'm sure we're going to connect with many people after this panel. But surrounding yourself with those people that you would like to emulate, or someone that is in alignment with what your growth strategy is, that's extremely vital. Finding a mentor, someone that you can exchange thought processes with. I have many throughout my journey, and that is extremely pivotal. When you have these people in your corner and you have someone where it's a counterpart, perhaps in your industry niche, or someone in professional, maybe I'll contact Celine and say, hey, Celine, I have this situation. How would you approach that? And being able to exchange and have those dialogues, that's extremely important, because we tend to have this Latina mindset that we can do everything on our own and we can handle it on our own. But success is not solely to our one person, right? Teamwork makes the dream work. And we need to understand that, right? And break those stigmas and those generational curses and all those things, and continue to thrive together. So mentors, expand your community. For those of you that are on here now, I'm just going to go ahead and say it on behalf of all of us. Do connect with us on LinkedIn and start with that, and peak a conversation and see how that goes. Selena, the mic is yours.
I was going to say, that was actually one of the questions that we got in. Nancy dropped in that question, which I think, Panayota, you really kind of touched on a little bit, is like, what is the best way to expand your network? Like some maybe examples of events or places to find like-minded people for someone in their 30s and still learning to expand their network and community. I will say, just a little commercial here, but I think Prospanica is really one of the most amazing places to start that journey. Because I know for myself personally, when I finished my MBA, I got some flyer in the mail about, it was at the time, it was called the National Society of Hispanic MBAs. And I was like, wow, that sounds interesting. And here we are several years later. And never would I at that time have envisioned myself being in this place at this moment. But that's an example of one community that has really helped me to grow. What other ideas do folks have for people to build that network, which as an adult and is sometimes hard to do?
I would say that sometimes people forget that digital space is a great place to build a network with people that you don't have to actually be in the same geographic region or proximity with, that you can find people online and build communities with people online, and they're very open to it. But one of the areas that I find that when you're building a community online that people forget is that you have to water things to grow. So when you build a community, it's not just about connecting and that's it, and then contacting that person when you might need something. It is about saying, okay, I remember now, I've jotted some notes down about Jackie, about Panayota, and Flari said, and I am thinking to myself, okay, if I come across some content like this, I'm going to make sure to send it to them so that I can say, I remember on our call, I remember on our webinar, so they remember where they met me, right? Because it's the amount of repetition, so them to remember where they met me and what we talked about. And I'm going to say, I thought you might find this of interest. Add value to others' lives, and you will start to see how that community will flourish, and they'll invite you into more areas of their networks and grow. It's really important. And just one other thing, digitally wise, when you're growing your network, that it's really important that now that we're learning about how social networks are structured and how we kind of get into pods, because they kind of place us into groups of people that are like-minded, that it's really important to find people purposely and intentionally outside of your network so that you can break that pod and add another string to another pod and start to get introduced to other topics and people. Because if you just stay within your network, you're just going to continue to get that same content and not grow it, right? So learning about how the algorithms and how the platforms work digitally is the same thing that you would do in person as well, going to different events, finding events for different reasons and following up. That was long. That was what I was going to say.
No, and you're speaking about movements, right? I mean, one thing is, how do we, grow ourselves. But creating a movement is a whole nother ball of wax, like we say, right? It's creating a movement is really about getting a group of people that have a unified vision for either a vertical, a circumstance, a situation, a core value, and bringing that community to elevate that, right? I've had the honor of creating several movements and also helped create a lot of movements through storytelling. And I started out with my 7th book. I created a book called Today's Inspired Latina. It's supposed to be one book, and it ended up becoming 10 volumes and almost 250 women in 26 countries. With that, I've traveled, to Europe 7 times. I've hosted events in Paris. I've hosted events in Belgium, in Amsterdam. I've toured, Europe through that, and I've been
So
to
happy to have you as part of my new community.
But it was amazing because I'm like, people were, and it was the common theme was adversity. How Latinas, had to overcome an adversity, right? I'm a two-time cancer survivor and all these things. I'm like, I just want the stories to be shared. Then I also, unbeknownst to me, created another movement that is historic in a movement, in a book series called Latinas in Aviation. It was a very tiny niche segment, but I'm like, where are the pilotinas in this world? Like, I want to know. And I found 22 women, Latinas in the various areas of aviation. It took me 9 months to find the first 22. I put together a book. And now, we have a partnership with the FAA. We've done stuff with, Homeland Security, with Latina everywhere, right? And they've actually dedicated a museum exhibit for the first time in history with artifacts donated by my author. So what is the one area that you feel, even if you feel it's so niche and it's so particular, but you feel a passion for, like I did when I found aviation 10 years ago, that you can use storytelling to elevate their stories, to create community, to create movements. And, now I have over 50 anthologies that I publish for other people. Again, storytelling has been that fabric that brings us together to create movements. So, and that involves so many other things, but that's one amazing way that I found all over the world, that can really bring people together and create an emotional connection unlike anything I've ever done. It's just magical.
An interesting question, that another one that kind of came through is how do you effectively pivot your personal brand during either times of career change or transition? And I think that that's an interesting one. Like, Jackie, you mentioned how you kind of came up with this whole new aspect, right? And, like now this is part of your brand, right? Being a Latina pilot. So how are some ways that you can pivot, right? If you go one way and now there's new part, I don't know, Selena, did you have something there that you wanted to? I got the sense.
This is just one of my absolute favorite topics. So I'm learning so much from all of you. And I feel like when you're doing a pivot, that's one of the areas that I specialize in. I get executives who are transitioning from one company to the next and want to make sure that they don't burn bridges because they may need to go back. And how do they pivot? And it's always, again, it goes to thoughtfulness and strategy, right? About how do you think about where you're going and where you've been, and what do people want? They want to be acknowledged, right? They want to know that something meant something to you and they want to support you going into your next role. So it's really important to think about how, when you're pivoting, what are you leaving behind? And how do you make them feel like what they contributed to your growth was important, or what you learned from that, so they feel like, okay, the time spent there is not like you're just forgetting us and throwing us away and pivoting and going to the next space. But then tying it to how you will continue to grow and bring some of those things forward into the next space. That's just one strategy to think about. But it is really, pivoting is a beautiful thing. Just like Panayota was talking about the journeys, we talked about the seasons. Everybody does it. Everybody pivots, but it's how you pivot to make sure that you're giving the right credit and credibility to the organization that you may be leaving or the career you may be leaving. And then also, I don't always say to get too personal, and depending on what social platform you're using, but sometimes it really does help to write an article and give a little bit more information when you're pivoting about why, because people just want to make sure that they understand where you're going and they want to continue to support you in your new path. but they don't know, are you just pivoting just to pivot, or did something bad happen? Never leave things to assumption, right? Write a little article that says, I've been here. This is my journey. It was been fantastic. And now I'm moving on, and your community will continue to support you rather than feeling like you're no longer part of it anymore. Does
Yeah,
that
I
make
love that. And yeah. And I was going to
That's
say,
important.
Fleur, you work a lot with students. And I mean, that's a big pivot, right? Like starting out in the work and making sure that they're, have you done any work with helping them kind of pivot in that journey as they're maturing?
You know, one of the things, and I wanted to add this before, is that it's where do they see themselves in 5 years, right? Especially for high school and college students. And I'm sure that you guys do this too on the professional setting. I do have professionals that come to me and I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And I do work with professionals as well, because personal branding is very broad, right? So I mean, it's not a broad, but it's an issue that we all face. And I think that where everyone sees themselves, like I time it out, right? And I know that you guys have touched on this. So where do you see yourself in 3 years, in two, right? So it's 3, 5, 10, and then on and on, because we all have desires to do different things, but they kind of like align themselves at some point, which we had already discussed. And I think that is very important. So when I asked someone that, I was asked that question, by the way, and I said, oh, okay. So that literally made me revisit myself and my future, because I think it's important to have an idea, to have a vision. And chances are that we plan a lot of things and it doesn't happen, but at least we have a vision. And once we have that vision, it will come to pass if we are on an alignment with our purpose and within our journeys. So
Yeah, and I want to share. Jacqueline had put this in the chat, and I just wanted to read this quote out. But she said, "We are going out there to chase perfection. We will never reach perfection, but along the way, we are going to realize excellence." That was from Vince Lombardi, and I think that really kind of ties in, right? Is that we don't know what that journey will take us, but you need to set that vision and those ideals and those goals. Maybe, Peniota, maybe you can touch on this question that came through the chat. Is
Sure.
what strategies can you use when there's negative feedback or criticism of your personal brand?
Well, this comes down to what your mentality and mindset is. And this comes down to your confidence, your self-reassurance, and where you are within your journey, right? When we're younger, we tend to care a little bit more of what people think, right? Of who we surround ourselves with. And as we get older, right, we're our third floor, our fourth floor, we tend to care a little bit less. But it depends. When you're looking at your brand, you can structure yourself having a response template where you can do a general response depending on what that messaging is. If it's something very foul language, you can hide it or delete it off your page. You can also block a person. So depending on what that messaging is, what your values and principles are, and how you want to respond. So you have to figure that out first. Never respond on emotion. Sleep on it, right? We never send an email to a coworker based on emotion. We take a moment, we take a step back,
Right.
and we think about it. So I always say, take a note on your phone and write what you really feel, so you can just get it out, get those emotions out, and then send to yourself and then do a response. So I don't know if that really answered the question, but you see, yep, someone said, yeah, we did that today. So sometimes we have to get out of our own way and let out the
Right.
emotion and then take a step back and go ahead and
Yeah.
approach that.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know what?
I
There's
mean,
oh, I'm sorry.
no, it's going to go ahead. No, please go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna add that as a publicist, typically when you're trying to share positive news to the world, you want the whole world to know all the amazing things that are going on. But when there's a crisis, when there's a PR, a communications crisis, typically the rule of that is that you don't volunteer information until it's requested, and you basically prepare what you call a holding statement, so that when there's an inquiry, you have carefully prepared a statement that, you know, is liability free. Many times in organizations, this liability statement is reviewed by the attorneys to make sure there's no additional liability. And there's an entire process of, hey, you know, there's a crisis, there's something going on. Who's going to be the point of contact for the media? And when the media contacts, as we continue to investigate, how do we stay true to ourselves, and how do we create that beautiful holding statement that is liability free, reviewed by the board, reviewed by, you know, people around you, you know, you have the advisory board, and then you release that, right? But you know, the idea is, you're right, Panayota, like you don't add any more fire to the, because that, you know, creates emotion, and try to stay objective, right? That's important. So it's taking a step back and creating that holding statement of the continuity and the consistency that you want to share, you know, and respond to that situation, whether it's media, whether it's people in your circle. You kind of stick to that script, right? That you've, you know, objectively put together, so that you don't get further into the hole, right? And that's a practice that we use in PR, but can also be used for a personal brand, of course. Right. So that's
just to expand on that a little bit, like from our brand, like how do you react if, you know, you've been kind of building your brand and you've got your, you know, kind of you're pleased with how your social medias are, and then somebody tags you, or somebody kind of, you know, does something and you're like, whoa, I don't really know what to do with that. Like how would you respond to something like that?
I
You
untag
have
my,
to-
I'm
yeah.
not associated. Simple as that, right?
I'm sorry, you would the
I
what?
untag myself. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, like, I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not associated. I didn't get permission to be tagged, and I don't really agree with what is being said. I just simply untag myself. Like, you know, move on.
I would say something that saying quiet is probably best, but yeah, untagging. But someone recently had posted a picture and they had put filter on it. I'm like, what? That's not even like, why are you adding more colors? I don't need more colors. I'm already. And I posted about that. It kind of like pissed me off. I'm like, okay, why people use filter? I'm like, come on. And they filter the whole, like all the pictures. I'm like, que esto, Dios mío. And you know, I put a PSA, of course. PSA, do not please, and you know, not. I thought about it afterwards, and I'm like, Freddy, are you reacting more on this or what?
Add
And
it
then,
to
you
your
know,
brand
sometimes you have to
guideline.
know yourself. So
Yeah, add that to
I'm
your
sorry.
brand guideline. No filters. You can add a clause within your brand guide. Sorry, my marketing coming in.
Yeah.
But you can put in there for your photos, no correction, no whatever the case may be, and you can send that.
Lucy, I just
You
want to
can
add
things, yeah.
one thing to that too, and that is, I love everything that all of you have touched on, and I'm going to take it just in a little bit of different space, and that is, if you don't have a legal team, or if it's not dealing with your company and it's just you as an individual, like you know, Panayota and Clarissa, you were talking about students that you deal with, and what I tried to tell them is that when you come across something like that, even in your the professional side of your career, and you get attacked digitally online, that it may be that someone just misunderstood you. So be authentic and do what you would do in person, right? Sometimes I have recommended that people just say, diffuse it by saying, I'm sorry, that you understood my quote to be that way, or my post to be that way. That's not what I meant. I meant this, but I can understand and see why you may have interpreted it that way. And thank you for helping making me better. I'll edit the post. I'm going to edit the post to make sure that I don't offend anyone, because that's not my intention. My intention was to educate, or my intention was to make people aware of this situation, or whatever it may be. But that goes a long way. People just want to know that you're listening, you care, and that we humanize it, right? We're authentic about it, and we treat each other with respect.
Yeah, someone
No,
said
this-
earlier, we just want to be heard. We want to be
Yep.
seen. And a lot of the times when we have a disagreement, or we have a misconception or a misinterpretation, it's really giving that person or providing them the platform to just speak their piece. And perhaps we do not agree, and we agree to disagree, but it does go a long way to what you're saying, Selena, of just providing that platform for those to express themselves. And this is the difficult thing with writing, whether it's text, whether it's email, whether it's social media, right? Or the World Wide Web, it's subject to interpretation. So while we have to be very cautious of what message we're putting out, or what we're writing and spell check and do all our things and really do the homework behind the context, we do have to understand that sometimes it's like running a football team, right? Everyone knows more than the coach, and you're not going to please everyone, right?
Yeah.
It's true. We're not going to please everyone. And once you go into the understanding and circling back to the beginning of the conversation, it's allowing yourself grace through that, because we continue to grow, we continue to learn, and we continue to evolve.
What a way to wrap it all up, Panayota. I
Yeah.
love it. So this has
My
been
professor hat coming in, Lucy.
I love that.
such a dynamic conversation, and I'm so appreciative of this. And I just really want to give a huge thank you to Flarice and Jacqueline and Panayota and Selena, and for Charisse for helping to support this. This has really been such an enthusiastic event, and really, I mean, we could probably have a part 2 of this. But I would like to give a sincere thank you to Prospanica National for their consistent support and leadership in bringing events like this to life. Their commitment to supporting Latinas in the workplace is genuinely inspiring, and each one of these sessions is just so much fun. We are pleased to announce that our next webinar will be on Latina Equal Pay Day, and that will be held on October 16th. So we hope you'll be able to join us for another insightful seminar. Also, please don't forget to mark your calendars for our national conference, which is scheduled from October 29th to the 31st in Orlando, Florida. And it promises to be an outstanding event with numerous opportunities for learning, networking, and professional growth. Actually, if you go on Prospanica National, you can get some information about some pre-conference sessions that they're showing to help prepare folks for that. And, one of the next one I think is going to be on resume building. And as we all know, that is a big part of our personal brand, right? When you're out there looking for a job. So I think we had mentioned this before, the question about building your network. Feel free to find us. We're all out there. And this has really been just such a great thing. And I thank all of our panelists for your time and your engagement today. This was truly a pleasure. I think we've got some great takeaways on ways to help grow our personal brands, and really look forward to seeing all of you at future events. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.